Please join me in welcoming Walter Paul to the podium.
Good morning. I'd first like to thank the Children's Scholarship Fund for inviting me to give this speech. Sandra Redding, who I've been communicating with throughout the couple of months, always reminded me in the numerous phone calls and emails we had how much of an honor it is for you guys to have me here. But I don't think she realizes how grateful I am to be able to escape the horrors of Calculus 2 and Arabic just for one day. And also, no one in their right mind will reject a flight on a private jet to Omaha. But really, I just love sharing my story and message for all who care to listen. My parents taught me a lot of lessons growing up, from stop teasing and hurting your little sisters to stop eating your little brother's chocolate fudge. I found those lessons to be disadvantageous to listen to, just to say the least. It's also safe to say that I was kind of a hassle growing up, but I balanced it all with a strict commitment to my parents' profound emphasis on the pursuit of education and the importance it holds in perpetual happiness. Such a commitment wouldn't have been possible without the help of organizations like the Children's Scholarship Fund. It's cliche, yet necessary to say, poverty is too real in the United States. It limits the hopes of families who wish to send their children to private schools. I experienced this firsthand. My blue-collar working parents brought us to the United States from the South Sudan and sacrificed everything in order to safeguard the success of their students. My father once worked 3 jobs at a time just to save up to put a better roof over our heads, while my mother worked 8-hour shifts while balancing it all with taking care of 8 children. And even with such hard work, they couldn't pay the dues to our Catholic education. Fortunately, the Children's Scholarship Fund lent them that hand and gave us that push that we needed. With your help, I was able to attend All Saints and receive one of the best educations of my life. It is because of your commitment that I was able to strive every day to finish that last calculus problem and memorize all my Arabic possessive pronouns, despite the dreadful difficulty. Because I know that with your love and support comes hope, and with hope comes faith. And I strive every day to give merit to such faith and the commitments you have to build the futures of our children and demonstrate that such a commitment can materialize to something greater. Getting involved in Creighton Prep's speech and debate program was a gateway to doing this. As ironic as it sounds, I was never the conversationalist amongst my colleagues, friends, and family. I was the epitome of reclusiveness, the antonym of fun, and the definition of introversion. I was sure that speaking in front of crowds only exposed me. It illuminated my weaknesses and tore every confidence I had into incorrigible pieces. I felt alone in the world, as if I took Hester Prynne's place on the pedestal and stood there as the world laughed at my humiliation. I can recall a moment in the 4th grade when my classmates and I were supposed to present a research project we've prepared for weeks. As my time to present came closer, my heart painfully pounded as if it wanted to escape the situation as much as I did. My tense nerves disabled me in front of my classmates, and my mouth glued itself tight, refusing to let any words out. Something was wrong. Nothing seemed right, so I embarrassingly sat down. It's apparent that back then, I was not cognizant of the indispensable power of words. Such a power ranges from the ever so peaceful and promising, "I love you," to the dark and forbidding, "I hate." We use words to conceptualize ideas, connect with each other, and most importantly, share our experiences. It is because of this idea of connecting with other people that inspired me to write the speech I will present to you today, entitled The Social Unconsciousness of Generation Why Bother. When I wrote this speech, I kept asking myself, so what? Why should they care? Why would anyone want to listen to a teenager compare about teenagers? I was almost questioning the impact that this will ultimately have. So I looked at myself, where I came from, my country of the South Sudan and Uganda, my hardworking parents, my siblings, and the younger generation as a whole, and saw how important it was for me to express such a concern for an issue that is tearing apart our society one by one. This issue is the gradual eradication of intrinsic motivation and service in my generation. I decided to start the speech off with my personal story dating back to the genocide my family endured in Uganda. In fact, my mother recalls the story as though it were yesterday. It was April of 1997, and my birth country of Uganda found itself in the midst of the Lord's Resistance Army's insurgency, led by the now notorious warlord, Joseph Kony. My family and I had watched on TV as Kony's army slaughtered our fellow countrymen in the far-flung corners of Uganda. But on that particular evening, he was coming for us. Hearing the commotion of the advancing soldiers and knowing that our home would soon be ransacked, my mother grabbed my sisters and me and abandoned our home, running through the dark night. Our paths illuminated only by the eerie glow of our neighbors' burning homes. My mother found a large rock and she ducked. As we took refuge and as the soldiers plundered our village, my mother recalls having one repetitive thought, does anyone in this world even care? The sense of hopelessness and loneliness that she felt that night is something that no one should ever have to feel. But personally, my experience in Uganda has kindled in me a burning desire to regain complacency by becoming a catalyst for change in my society. Unfortunately, many of my peers do not share in this same sentiment. If anything, my generation, the millennials, have become socially unconscious as we've become more self-oriented. In other words, we've hidden behind the lie that elevating our society is the job of older and more experienced individuals, an attitude that pervades our generation, which makes it ever the more urgent that we seek to inspire them to open their eyes and take up the reins of their society. I hope you don't take this speech as just another complaint about the millennials, but rather an outcry for hope in a hopeless generation with so much promise, but little to show for it. Because as the somewhat motto of our generation states, YOLO, you only live once. So let's make our generation worth it. In fact, dictionary.com defines the millennial generation as the generation born between the 1980s and the 1990s. It also notes that we were brought up using social media and digital technology. This, I believe, is a very generous description because it doesn't make fun of us. So today, I'm going to do just that. We spend countless hours with our friends and only volunteer here and there. It's no wonder. Journalists and psychologists still label us the most narcissistic generation to date. Evidence of this narcissism can be found in our preoccupation with Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. We're viewed by society as the closed-off, self-centered, turned down for what, but first, let me take a selfie generation. Funny, but superficial views, promoted by none other than ourselves. Only in our generation is tweeting in church or in the bathroom considered a normal thing. And it's no surprise that the issue of texting and driving came up in our era. Social media is drawing our attentions away from the issues of society and instead gluing our eyes to the screens of our phones. And it has to stop. The American Psychological Association found that baby boomers and Generation X are much more interested than millennials in developing a meaningful philosophy on life, and are significantly less interested in accumulating wealth. The study also found that millennials indicated we volunteer in order to get into a good college, illuminating our generation's propensity to put ourselves first. In other words, we've lost every sense of intrinsic motivation, the motivation driven by a love and enjoyment of the task itself, not just its benefits. The explanation of this self-centered mentality was identified by Harvard researchers as the end of history illusion. As millennials, we too often fast forward and try to judge our lives so early in the process of growing, we fail to develop values as we grow. The problem is that our selfies, the perverted jokes of Daniel Tosh, and of course, the captivating abs of Chris Christie won't always appeal to us in the future. We have little expectations for our days as if they have no value. The result is that we've given up, succumbing to a lifestyle that perpetuates immaturity. The generation following us is already identified as the caring and inclusive generation, whereas us millennials are called Generation Y, Bother, which, in all fairness, is a critical question to ask. This hyper-focus on personal achievement has only created a generation characterized by a loss in faith and a retreat into our own worlds rather than a mission to bandage the wounds of our society. The result is that we've become an enemy to society and, ironically, to ourselves. The effects of our social unconsciousness is seen in our daily struggles of abuse, assault, and too frequently, suicide. The United States Centers for Disease Control and Prevention reported on May 3rd of 2014 that 85% of us millennials face abuse and suicide every single day. 95% of that is a direct result from abuse from our own peers. This is where we put our phones down, heads up, and open our eyes, because it's where we need to get serious. Because these numbers are more than just statistics, especially for 15-year-old Audrey Pott of Pennsylvania, who killed herself in 2013 after being sexually assaulted by two boys who then posted the videos on YouTube that eventually went viral. The Huffington Post reported that reactions from most teenagers, us, the millennials, did not mirror the ones expressed by Audrey's parents, but were laced with laughter and cynicism. And that's how disconnected we are. The sad fact is, these names continue, the numbers multiply while the ignorance persists, and at some point, we have to ask ourselves, when is enough enough? Where's the mark of our maturity? These behaviors are leading to a decay of society because of our indifferent sentiment. As millennials, we too often choose to take flight rather than fight for our own success. In other words, we've turned the internet, Twitter, and Facebook into an escape from reality, a coping mechanism for our inability to accept responsibility and take action. That's the problem that needs to be addressed. On the upturn, there is hope, because the beautiful thing about our generation is that we thrive on second chances. So when the pressure of solving the world's problems with a magical potion is removed, we can build momentum for real change by taking it step by step. This means holding hands and making social consciousness more collaborative. We don't need selfies anymore, we need groupies. And with constant investments in technology, this should come easy. Well, first, because nowadays, selfies tend to include 5 other people, and second, because the world appears smaller, meaning the relationships we build are much more accessible and diverse. You can communicate with people from the South Sudan, Germany, Australia, and take conversations far beyond just a shallow understanding of their experiences. Notice I left out Canada in that whole noting. As a result, we'll be able to build relationships far beyond just ignorance. It's all about being more aware of things and individuals we bypass on a daily basis. The stories of my family's tribulations in Uganda has kindled in me a burning desire to embrace a deeper philosophy of social consciousness. The reason is that I know that somewhere, someone else's mother will smile and say, Dano iwilobene damo. People in this world do care. Thank you.